Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Dose. Today's episode is incredibly important as we look at the human cost behind the statistics we talk about.
We are joined by Christina, a representative from Song for Charlie, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness about Fentapills, which are counterfeit fentanyl pills, and the dangers of hidden fentanyl.
Christina isn't just an expert, she is also someone who's personally experienced the loss of a family member to this crisis. Christina, thank you so much for being brave enough to share your story with us today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I always welcome the opportunity to get to connect with youth that are out there wanting to make a difference with the fentanyl crisis and save lives. That's what you guys are doing.
Yeah. To start off, we just wanted to ask a little more about the work that you do at Song for Charlie. We wanted to know more about the mission at Song for Charlie and how the organization is currently supporting families and students.
Absolutely. So Song for Charlie was founded in 2020 when two parents, Ed and Mary Trinan, lost their son Charlie when he purchased what he thought was a Percocet pill on Snapchat. And Charlie was in his final semester at Santa Clara University. And, he was your average college student. Charlie didn't suffer from substance abuse disorder. What happened in Charlie's situation is that Charlie had had back surgery a year prior to his death, and Percocet is a medication that he was given to manage his pain. And so, flash forward to a year later, Charlie was just getting ready to graduate school. He was having some job interviews, so he was a little kind of nervous about that. And his back pain returned. And so he was on Snapchat. Someone was marketing Percocet. He felt like, oh, this is a pill that I'm familiar with. I know how my body reacts. And so he thought that he was making a safe choice. And unfortunately, the pill that Charlie got was not a Percocet, or excuse me, was not a Percocet at all. And instead, it was a fentanyl laced pill. And Charlie died very soon after taking that. And his parents decided really early on, once they discovered what Charlie had died from, that they wanted to dedicate their lives and their work to spreading awareness about these dangers, specifically to younger people that are coming up against these kind of in their everyday life on social media, just going about living their days. And so Song for Charlie is all about developing resources to support youth that are being impacted, to help educate about what the dangers and risks are so that they can make safe choices. And we have a whole bunch of resources that are designed to support the young people themselves. We have different films and tools and things like that. But then we also have resources that I can talk about too to support the family, because we really believe that there's power in making sure that those that are directly being impacted by this danger and risk understand what's happening out there and what's happening right now, not what happened when I was your age or your parents were your age or anything like that, about what's happening right now. And that it's also important that parents understand what's happening. And we really believe by educating kind of both parents and youth that that's where we can really make a difference.
So, going more into the social media aspect that you mentioned earlier. So, as you mentioned, like we often see social media being used to distribute these pills, which is often unsafe and is also used to target like young teens, young adults, and like a lot of communities that may not know about this problem. So, what should students know about the deception involved in how these pills are marketed online?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because it's the deception, that's the key word there, is a lot of times people are unknowingly ingesting something that they think is safe. So in the case of my niece Claire, whose story is similar to what happened to Charlie, Claire was 22, and in Claire's situation, she suffered from anxiety and depression. And so she took Xanax, is a medication that she took to help manage her symptoms. And so Claire, when she was, feeling kind of particularly vulnerable, made just one choice that ultimately ended her life. but she thought that she was making a safe choice. She thought this is a medication she knew. And, and so that's just how easy it is. And where the deception comes in, especially on social media, is that these pills, the dealers on social media are not out there kind of identifying that they're selling fentanyl and here's these drugs that you can get. They are marketing them to be perceived safe medications, prescription medications that people are familiar with. Medications like Xanax or Adderall or Percocet. And so they are marketing to be those prescribed kind of safe medications. But unfortunately, more times than not, those pills that are being sold as one thing are completely something different. And more times than not, they're laced with enough fentanyl to potentially kill someone. And so that is the risk. Like at Song for Charlie, we have kind of like a slogan. I always say it's like a key takeaway if I'm ever presenting at schools or on campuses, universities, is no random pills. And what that means, like in a nutshell, is like unless a medication is coming from a parent, a doctor, your pharmacy, your name's on the bottle, you have to assume that it's not safe because unfortunately the drug supply right now is not safe.
And thank you for that answer. That was very informative. One thing I noticed you saying a lot with your story about Charlie as well as about your niece is that they thought that they were making a safe decision when purchasing these off of social media. So, what are some red flags that you would suggest students look for when pills are being advertised online if they're thinking of trying to take something off of that?
Right, right. That's a great question. And this is a question that I get asked often. And there's a lot of kind of telltale signs. The one thing that I also like to put out there as a myth buster, and I say this anytime that I'm talking to anybody, whether it's youth or adults or seniors, is that um, is that there is no legitimate medications being sold on social media. None. Like not on Snapchat, not on TikTok. It's none of it is legit. And more times than not, it has nothing to do with the pill that they're actually marketing it and deceiving for it to be. So that's the kind of a number one thing is don't trust medications being sold on social media because it's straight up not what you think it is. The other kind of some telltale signs too, so there are fentanyl test strips is something that's out there. People may have heard of those. And so it's basically a way kind of to test if a particular substance or pill has fentanyl in it. And so the caveat with fentanyl test strips is in order for it to be effective, the substance has to be destroyed. So if it's in pill form, it has to be crushed and dissolved into water. Basically, it's unusable. And so what dealers often will do, and excuse me, pardon me, sorry, folks. What dealers will often do on social media are notorious for doing this is holding up a baggie of pills and saying, this has been tested. And so that right there is a key that they're just straight up lying because in order for a pill to be tested, it has to be destroyed, dissolved into water. So if something's ever being presented in pill format, there's no way that it's been tested. So that's kind of another sort of key thing. And the pills may look like legit medications. The other issue with the deception is that these medications, it's not easy to tell they're fake. If you and I were to see a real Adderall alongside a fake Adderall, or the same with a Xanax or Percocet, we wouldn't be able to tell them apart because the fakes are just that good. Unfortunately, the drug dealers that are pushing them are really good at what they do. And so there's no way to kind of tell or be able to spot a fake pill.
And so you were explaining a lot about how any pill on social media is not safe for use and not safe to be bought. Um, is there anything that you would say to someone who thinks that they are being careful when they're buying something off of social media, if after giving them this information, they still feel like they are being careful?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I think that, the reality is eh, young people are faced with a lot of things that were not issues or concerns 5 years ago, 10 years, 20 years ago. And so what's happening right now is the fact that while people like my niece and the many young people and Charlie that have died in this way, unknowingly, have been poisoned by this, is the fact that they are thinking they're getting one thing and that that's a safe choice, but they're not getting that medication. And so that's why we are saying no random pills, because it's all about trusting your source. And so the reality is there are many stresses, many pressures and things that are happening current day, the climate that we're living in right now, just, there's much that is happening right now. And so the temptation to self-medicate, that was the case in Claire's instance. She was self-medicating, but where she made an unsafe decision was not seeking out what would be a safe medication under a doctor's care from a professional. That's kind of the thing. So I think, like, for example, if you have a friend that is, they have a lot of anxiety, they have a lot of stress, their exams are coming up, whatever the case is, and that you've seen them kind of using substances, kind of self-medicating. I think it's what we always try to talk about is finding kind of safer coping strategies that are not involving substances, because unfortunately the reality is like, where experimentation back in the day was just that, it was experimenting. It was just that you might take a substance at a party, you might, take it and, feel crappy the next day, or you might take it and like it and then take it some more. And over time, months down the line in that use or experimentation, you might take too much of that substance and overdose. Now it's a climate where your first time or second time out there could be the last time out there. And so that's just the nature of the drug landscape right now. Like, what as far as like safety measures and things that people can take, it's super, super important. And Song for Charlie, we have videos on our site that young people can access to kind of, get a crash course on things. But it's really important that young people understand how to recognize and respond to an overdose, because it's crucial. Unfortunately, many of these deaths, like in Charlie's case, is a good example. He died in the presence of his friends, and they just thought that he was, that he was kind of nodding off and sleeping, and they didn't realize that that's a telltale sign of an overdose. Things like gurgled or labored breathing, kind of snoring sounds, or someone that's kind of sleeping or looks like they dozed off. Like, those are all signs that someone could be in distress. So it's really critical. Like, when we're educating in schools and in our student film, which I definitely recommend that people that are interested in kind of taking a little bit of a deeper dive, we have a film called Real Talk About Fake Pills, and it's a 20-minute film. It's a really quick watch. And the latter part of the film gives it's a brief video on how to recognize the signs of an overdose and how to respond by taking naloxone, or Narcan is the brand name, which is an opioid reversal medication, and it's truly life-saving. So like in Charlie's instance, if his fraternity brothers had realized, like, oh, these are one of those signs that we heard about, like, we're going to call 911, and does anyone have Narcan or naloxone to administer, his life could have potentially been saved. So it's super important to be aware of what those signs of an overdose are and how to administer naloxone. And, depending on what parents kind of rules and guidelines are, or what a school's guidelines are, we always say, have naloxone on you, whether you take it out of the box and you put it in a purse, or a backpack or anything like that, in a car even. It's in a car, it's vulnerable to temperatures or whatever, but we always say, out of date, or naloxone in a car is better than none at all.
These are some really, really important points that you've mentioned. And actually, in some of our presentations, we've talked to parents like about what is fentanyl and do you know about these pills? And a lot of them said that no, we don't, especially parents in communities where maybe they haven't really grown up having these issues that are present, especially here in the United States, is more present in compared to like other countries. So, what measures and like specific steps do you think schools, communities, churches, and just any
Like community
institution,
spaces.
yeah, should be taking to better like spread awareness of this issue?
Yeah, I love this question. By the way, all of your questions are great questions. I love this question in particular because I think a really important step in any community is to dispel, like, one of the things that I hear way more often than I should, and it's a very dangerous line of thinking, is when I hear from parents or even community figures like, oh, not my problem. Like, my kid doesn't have that problem, or our community doesn't have this problem. We're not a drug community, or my child doesn't struggle with substances. It's a really, what I always say in response is, that's a really dangerous line of thinking, because the reality of this situation, it does make it very unique, is that everybody is at risk. Fentanyl does not discriminate against age, race, economic status, like whether a neighborhood is affluent or a poverty area, that everybody is at risk. All ages are at risk. And so, boy, excuse me, I'm sorry this it's going to hamper the recording, but everyday life is happening here. So I think one of the number one things like a community can do, a school can do, a church group can do, is to educate. And so part of like Song for Charlie's whole mission is to have turnkey solutions that schools and communities and organizations can use, so that the school doesn't need to have teachers that are subject matter experts. A community that wants to host an event to raise awareness doesn't need to bring in legions of experts on the topic and all of that. Like, that's kind of what our resources and our films do. So we have a film that's called The New Drug Talk. It's a 27-minute documentary, and it gives a really excellent overview of kind of like, this is the drug landscape, what's happening right now. This is what community and caregivers and families need to know. Like, here's what's happening, here's what the substance is, here's what the risks are, here's how to open up a conversation with the young people in your life. Here's what to do if they don't want to have the conversation. So we have a lot of tools. And so as far as the community, from the community perspective, it is to start by hosting an event. Like, hold a screening. We have a film that can be used for free for anybody anywhere across the country. You can bring together local officials in the area. We have materials like a discussion guide. And so it's a real easy lift for a community, because they can screen the film that will give everybody in attendance a really good foundation about what they need to know to stay safe. That's kind of like, in a nutshell, that's what it's all about. And it has discussion points and topics for Q&A and all that sort of thing. So it makes it like an easy lift on a community. The same goes for like in schools, for example. Is we have a resource, the film I mentioned, Real Talk About Fake Pills, which is designed to kind of take our in-person presentation and cover the highlights about what students need to know to stay safe. And there's even like, here are, you guys who are students that are interested in making an impact. We even have like a peer discussion guide. So let's say if you guys wanted to host a screening at your school, or an after school club that you're a part of, or you know, where you as the students lead the presentation, which can be super, super powerful. We have the tools to help you do that without having to be an expert. And it's kind of like my main kind of piece of advice is that, like, you just have to have the event, because unfortunately, and I've experienced this in my own neck of the woods, where I was trying to get into different schools, and I was trying to have community events and do things, and there was a lot of that, not here, not my area, not my school, unfortunately, until tragedy hit. And then all of a sudden people are wanting to have an event and educate people. People are thirsting for information, but unfortunately there was a life that was lost. So I always say you want to try to be proactive about it and assume that, like, everybody is at risk, and here's an easy way to host a community event. And so I think it's trying to dispel that myth that it's not a problem in our area, because everybody is vulnerable. That's the unfortunate reality.
And I think it's amazing how you're very clearly passionate and you have so many different ways and suggestions to help spread this awareness throughout our communities. And so I was just wondering, because you've mentioned that you have experienced personal loss because of this issue, has that changed the way you approach your work in advocacy and education in any way, or the way you try to spread this message?
It definitely has. Thank you for asking that question. It definitely has. Like, when Claire died, I mean, it took me 2 years to even consider wanting to do something. I was that grief stricken. Our family was that stricken. And then I finally one day got to a point where I was like, I wanted to do something, and I wanted to make sure that other young people didn't needlessly die in that same way. And because of Claire's age, Claire was 22 when she died. And I know in my heart that, like, if Claire had had the education that is now happening in schools and happening in communities with resources like we have, and just the fentanyl education, whether it's Song for Charlie or any organization that's doing this work, that's doing this good work, it's like, I believe that if she had had this education back in 2021, if Charlie had had this education in 2020, I believe that Claire would still be here. I honestly believe that. And so when I was looking to get involved in some way and discovered Song for Charlie, what mattered most to me at that time was reaching young people, because I realized that, like, you know, in Claire's situation, and this is many times the case, she made a decision based on a lack of information. And so the solution to that problem is making sure that young people have that information. And so I share her story, and it's hard. It's hard to, you know, has passed away. It's been almost 5 years now. And every time I tell the story, it's hard to tell, but it's so, so important to tell. And I show a brief video. I have like a 1-minute montage of her living her 20-something life, and she was a musician, and she was an avid skateboarder, and she was an accomplished writer who was honored in Carnegie Hall. Like, I show a video of her living her life because I want to show, before I talk about how she died, I want to show how she lived, because I think fentanyl is in the headlines now a lot, which is also very good. But she's not just a headline. She's an everyday young person, just like you amazing youth that I'm talking to right now. She was an amazing person. And you know, in telling her story, I hear often afterwards, like, oh my gosh, like, she reminds me of me or my friend or my cousin, you know. And it puts a little humanity in the fact that this is happening to everyday young, innocent people that are unknowingly, ingesting something. And that education, I think it's, and in the work that we do, oftentimes, like in our, whether it's our videos or when we're presenting in person, we share our stories because it makes it real, because this is real, and it is impacting people. And so how sometimes people will ask, how can you tell her story, again and again, all the time, every day? Like, how do you do that? And I just say, because if I have one conversation with one person, and they're at a party somewhere and they learn something, or they think of something, or they think of Claire, and they stop and pause even for a second, or they tell a friend, hey, remember about the chocolate chip cookie effect, or remember Claire, that's why I do it, because it's all about just kind of Song for Charlie. Our approach is all about, we don't believe in scare tactics, which is what really resonated with me as well too. Like, we're not about like scaring, because unfortunately the reality, the statistics, they're scary. There's no need to kind of like, scare. It's just about, we believe in kind of sticking with the facts, like what's happening, what you need to know. Like, this is something, the drug landscape now is really changing a lot. There's new substances that are emerging, and so things are just changing rapidly. And so we're all about just empowering young people with information so they can make safe choices, and so they can help keep their friends safe. And so that's, like, to me, is always the spirit in which I approach things. Is like, I'm not here to tell you guys what to do. You have enough people in your life that do that. And that's not why I'm here. That's not why your school brought me here, if that's the case. It's all about how to keep you guys safe, so that you know what you're up against, so that you know what the risks are.
Yeah, thank you so much. All of your work has helped kind of fentanyl and all this drug overdose, all these topics actually come to the headlines. And that's how us, like as students, and also our whole community is kind of becoming more aware. So we genuinely really appreciate it a lot. Um, One of my last questions would probably be like, if a student listening to this podcast chooses to make a different decision or not take a pill because of this episode, what would you want them to remember the most out of all of the amazing topics that we've discussed?
Yeah, I mean, the it's that no random pills. Like, unless the medication is coming to you, prescribed to you, for you, with your name on the bottle, you have to assume it's not safe. And whether that's a pill from a friend of a friend, that's still a random pill, because you don't know where your friend got that pill. Did they get it on social media? Did they get it from a dude down the street at the park? You just don't know. So that's always how I start every conversation, is like, if you guys tune in for one thing and one thing only, it's this. Never take something from someone, a pill from someone that you don't know. And the same goes with substances. Fentanyl is being cut into other harder street drugs like heroin, cocaine, and meth.
And the last question that we wanted to ask you, that we're asking all of our interviewees, is drugs does cause sort of a high that tends to be addictive. So what is your favorite natural high? Like spending time outside, but or like spending time with family. Like, what is your favorite natural high that you would choose over drugs any and every day?
I love this question too, and it's something that we like to talk about too, because, like, what are alternatives to self-medicating? Because, like, the reasons that people are self-medicating are real, like real stresses, real pressures. And I always say, for me, like, when I'm feeling stressed or anxious or just overwhelmed by what's happening, I love to run. Like, to me, if I can just like get outside and run, and feel the air and just get the adrenaline pumping from that, whether it's I'm having a good day, like an amazing day, it feels great. If I'm having a bad day or I'm stressed, and I mean, on the worst day of my life when Claire died, like, I went outside and ran, and I just ran and ran and ran and ran. And so like for me, that's what works. And I love this question because I'll always say, like, what works for you guys? Is it talking to a good friend? Is it meditating? Is it doing reading a book? Or, you know, kind of find out what works for you yourself, and, you know, and what works for your friends, because that's key. Like the pressures and the stress are not going away. The temptations to self-medicate or experiment, that's all natural and real. And so it's, yeah, just finding healthier ways because of the risks that are there.
Conversation was very eye-opening to all of us. I feel like this is like the first time that we truly actually understood fully like the effects, and your story and the work for Song for Charlie are just such vital parts of this conversation. So thank you for helping us and all of our listeners understand the heart behind the headlines.
And to all of our Yes. And to all of our listeners, please visit songforcharlie.org to see the resources that they're offering for both students, families, and community members. You can also follow us on Instagram, at TikTok, and YouTube for more clips from our interview.
Of course. Don't forget to connect with us on LinkedIn as we continue to work with leaders across the country to bring these stories to light.
Stay informed and look out for one another, because that dose of reality, it only takes one.